Self-agency and focus. What I want to dive into today with Mandy is really looking at some of the key pillars that we can put in place to make sure we can really hit our goals into 2025. The last episode we did on this was diving into our goal setting framework that we did with our clients at the end of 2024. To really get clear, I guess, taking it from a wish to a goal, really starting to get tactical on some of those steps, both the obstacles that might get in the way, as well as the systems we can put in place to actually make sure things stick. But what I want to share today is going to be an awareness of or I guess an overview of the first mindset call of the year we do with our clients to really get clear on what's the stuff that gets in the way. Because I think, Mandy, you've seen a bunch of these facts as well, right? Around how people set New Year's resolutions and they last all of about 10 to 14 days and then they're done for the year. And I find it less about the drive to achieve the goal and more about the introduction of going back to work and kids going back to school and just noise starting to increase again, right? And I think the beautiful thing about the Christmas New Year period is enough space to simply reflect, slow down, and get clear on what's important, right? So it's intentionality. So as soon as we get back into life and things get busier and busier and noisier and noisier, that intention kind of falls away really quickly.
It does. Yeah.
So I think what I want to share today is going to be more that awareness of the three, as I said, pillars that allow us to build a bit of a clearer focus on what's getting in the way and what you can do differently this year to make it just simply easier to achieve the goal. And I think one of the things that I'm going to really push in this training today, Mandy, is the ability to look at it's not a lack of desire or even discipline. It's simply a lack of removing noise. And as the world gets busier, that noise just gets louder and louder, and people become less and less intentional, less and less aware. Right? And awareness and health, they tie in together so quickly. As soon as you get beyond simply dumbbells and calories, you start to look at gut health and mental health and sleep quality. You realize that awareness is ultimately the foundation to all of this stuff working properly. So, the first one I kind of want to start on is this idea of really hitting home, building the no muscle, building this concept of what can I say no to, right? And I think as Kiwis, Aussies, and even Canadians, we're kind of known for not being that great at saying no. So, building an ability to simply get an awareness of where that's getting in the way, and hopefully for you, making it clear enough that you want to do something about it. Because you're probably already aware that for most of us, we're people pleasers, we enjoy helping others. But when it becomes to the detriment of our own health or our own goals, then at some point, then it kind of needs to be a threshold or a limit of that giving, right? The most successful and the least successful people in the world both are givers. It just one knows where to draw the line, okay? And I think even looking at this from a sporting standpoint, one of the quotes I heard recently on a podcast was this idea of uh, a lot of us look at the person that got the gold medal and the person that got fifth place as something that the person in fifth place lacks. But in reality, it's a lot of the time the person in fifth place has a distraction that the person in gold doesn't have, right? So it's this idea of focus first and foremost, to really getting clear of what is that distraction, what's getting in the way. And we see it with business owners all the time where they are running four businesses and they're all struggling. Imagine if they got rid of those other three and just focused on one. How easy would it be for that thing to grow, right? So I think this overall concept applies across the board. And of course, if you've got kids and you've got multiple roles at work and X, Y, and Z, there's always a reason for you to say, yeah, but I really want you to take the time to bring awareness to, okay, you can either be right and be busy this year and not achieve anything, or you can look at the things that can actually change and start to pull back some of that focus a bit more.
Mm, mm. I think there's two important things there. One is that word focus, and um, what are you actually doing the thing for? But I think an interesting exercise to do at the moment, because it's very fresh, is, and we're just coming off the back of what's the 6th of January today, just coming off the back of a couple of weeks for most people having had some time off. How many times on reflection through that time period did you say yes to something you didn't want to do? You said yes to an extra serving of something, or you said yes to a drink you didn't want, or you said yes to doing something you didn't want. Like, just actually going back and reflecting on that and noticing how often you did that is an interesting exercise, first and foremost. And then thinking, well, I did that. It's not about beating yourself up about it, but what do you do different next time? How do you change that? And that's where I think that focus thing becomes super important, because the only reason you said yes to that thing you didn't want to is because you weren't in that moment thinking about what was truly important to you. You were just thinking about what was important in that moment. So if you're in those moments and able to actually bring into focus that kind of bigger goal, those longer term things of what's important to you, whether it's your health or your weight loss or your energy or whatever it is, if you can bring those into focus in those moments, it's much easier in that time to be like, actually, nah, I'm all good. I don't need that right now. Or no, I won't have that, and actually build that no muscle, say no a little bit more often and find out that it's okay to do that and no one dies as a result of it.
Yeah, we had a client in one of our trainings last year that mentioned this concept of when you're in that moment, you get to choose regret or guilt. And I don't like it because it's a double negative, but I do like it because it allows you to get an idea of a clear choice, right? Like, are you going to regret continuing to not do something for yourself, or are you going to have that guilt of not showing up for the other person? You kind of get to choose one, right? You get to like do the thing for you and feel great, but a little bit guilty because you didn't do that thing for the other person, right? Or that regret of constantly saying no to your own things to say yes to someone else.
Mm.
And you get to choose, and there's probably a percentage of one or the other you play here,
Mm.
but you get to choose that balance, because if it's always regret, that's going to be weighing on you pretty quickly. All right. So
Yeah.
I guess that's something this is really built on as well, because hopefully by now you've taken a little bit of time to reflect on what those goals are or what the intentions for the year are that are super important for you. If you haven't, I think that was literally our last episode. So go back, watch that one, come back to this one. But if you have got that in place, this training, this episode, hopefully just allows you to really prepare yourself for the rest of the year, knowing that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. You've probably got a really busy day. Every time I ask people how they are, the first word that comes out of their mouth is busy, right? And that's the biggest reason that a lot of the stuff you want to do is not getting done. And one of the books that we've recommended to a lot of our clients as one of our sort of like top 5 recommendations for the last 3-4 years is The One Thing by Gary Keller. Really good book. Really simple concept, but the idea is that what's the one thing that I can do that makes everything else easier or irrelevant? And I think it's just a beautiful phrase to keep in mind for all of the things you have. Every time that you feel you're getting a bit anxious, you're getting a little bit buried under with the amount of things you need to do, it's probably because you're trying to run after 3 rabbits all at once, right? And I saw this with my dog recently. I've led off into a park with about 100 rabbits all in one place, and absolutely hilarious not getting close to any of them because it's very excited, very distracted, and couldn't just chase one, right? So I've got a very good visual of that one now. But what that actually looks like in a day to day example, let me give you some, because I think in theory, it's like, yes, Ollie, that sounds nice, but I've got all of the things I need to do, right? I've got kids to pick up. I've got a full 8 hour work day to complete, if not 10 hours, as well as this, that, and the other to complete in one day. Where do I start? So here's some examples that I talked through with my wife last night that I think would be really good to bring up. So first one is a clock off time, right? So for my wife, she loves getting everything done before the day is finished. But what ends up happening is rather than finishing at 5 o'clock, that ends up being a 6 or 6:30, right? What that then does is compress everything that she would otherwise do in that nighttime into half an hour, or simply can't get it done, and then the day starts again, right? So a big place to both keep yourself accountability and just create one anchor, that one thing that makes everything else easier, becomes that clock off time. All right. And if you're just going to hold yourself to a 5 o'clock cutoff time, that can be nice in reality, but something actually has to happen there, right? Which is you need to have a 30-minute block that starts at 4:30 for you to consolidate the stuff that you can complete in that day and the things that you can't, right? Because if you work up till 5, you all know, if you enjoy your work, is that you continue to work till 5:36 because you've got all those things that just need a little bit more attention, right?
Mm.
So by time blocking that last half an hour of her day, allows her to really make sure that she actually gets to the gym. She has time to come home, have a good dinner, have a bath, all of these things to actually just wind down rather than it be 10:30 before she's even got to dinner, right?
Mm.
Another example, which can be more relevant potentially to business owners or people that are self-employed, is this idea of focusing on the marketing instead of the website. And what I mean by that is focus on your constraint, because I've seen this too often last year where, even in myself, where I really enjoy coaching, I really enjoy working with clients. But if I'm in a spot where I find another constraint in my business that is something that needs to improve or needs more attention, then everything I'm doing on the first thing I enjoy is pulling away from the thing that needs to get better, right? So it's more a case of either way I'm going to be busy, but I'm spending my time in the wrong space, right?
Yeah.
So I think if you're self-employed or you have more agency over your own work, that can be a really big one. And even you and me, Mandy, we were talking about the areas of mastery that we wanted to improve versus the things that we were constantly doing. And you only need to talk for about 10 minutes to realize that you're like, hang on, I'm spending too much time in this area and I need to reallocate attention to this area. All right. And I think without that happening often, you just get busier and busier and busier. And the markers that you want to improve don't get better. Right. So it's just a nice point of awareness there.
Yeah, I think that translates into work life and home life as well, really, really well. In that,
Yep.
in the home situation, it's really easy to get sucked into doing the little things all the time, like, oh, vacuuming, the washing, the dishes, those sorts of things, getting the groceries. without actually looking at, have you set up systems that make that as quick and easy as possible? Are you working really, really hard, but not actually getting very far because you haven't taken the time to zoom out from it a little bit and actually create a better system? And I think the same in a work scenario. And I feel like this has become particularly relevant to me over Christmas and New Year, and having a bit of a break and kind of stepping out and looking at it from above, where you can very quickly get sucked into doing this busyness, which doesn't translate to as much benefit as it might have if you actually spent that time doing something that was a higher level task, so to speak, which kind of ties into the next point we're going to talk about. But um, you really have to be able to have a strong sense of being able to say no to those niggling little busynesses, which will always be there, and ignore them for a minute and say, I'm just going to leave those and I'm going to do this other thing, which it doesn't seem quite so urgent in this moment, but overall it's going to have a much bigger effect in the long term.
Totally. Yeah. And we use a visual here that maybe we should put in our training for today. But this idea of busy or important, right? And a lot
Mm,
of things that are urgent are not important. And I think just
mhm,
that deciphering of the things that are shouting that needs to be done right now are probably also the things that constantly keep you busy, but not moving forward in the area of your life you want to.
mm,
So, yeah, let's dive into step two, which is this idea of pride and quality. And this one actually literally came up in our kickoff call with our new client starting this year, which it was really cool to have this connection with a client within 10 minutes of talking to her. But really diving into the space of like, I really want to do these things, but I have this overarching feeling that I need to be at work longer than everyone else. I'm the manager. I need to be there longer. And if I go to the gym at lunchtime, I feel bad because other people in my business are working or in my department. So it's this awareness and I think guilt in a lot of ways that's
mm,
way more prominent than I think people give credit. Is that they feel they need to be working harder. They need to feel that they're looking busy. And this becomes an external pressure as much as an internal one, right? So in this particular case, it was really cool to dive into it. But for me, it was looking at this idea of, and I've actually put a quote in today's training that I want to share because it really hit me, and I thought it encapsulated what I was trying to get across, which was quality, not quantity, is my measure.
mm,
And although so simple, it's a really cool way of looking at, well, what do you really want to put out in the world? Do you want to just put more stuff out there, right? And be like every other social influencer that just goes to ChatGPT, writes in 100 quotes and puts them out on the internet like everyone else? Or do you
mm,
want to really spend some time putting together a piece that really changes the way people think about X, Y, and Z, health in our space? So being able to look at that in regards to the quality required to achieve the outcome of like a really good piece of content, like today's mindset call, right? Thinking about it for weeks, ideation around what are those key topics that I'm going to put in place and what am I going to take out of it isn't just a 10-minute job, chuck a couple of things on a piece of paper and then move on to the next task.
mm,
It really, this morning was a really good example of like, cool, everything else is blocked out and I'm spending 2-3 hours on this just to get it right. And I think that's going to be a really nice theme. I'm talking to myself here as well because it's very much going to be something through the year that it's taking on less stuff, but just making them much better. And I think, Mandy, you and I have seen this throughout the last 4 years play out, where the amount of stuff that we're doing, even the amount of trainings that we do in a month, has reduced, but the quality
mm,
of each one of those trainings has got better every single year, right? Middle of COVID 2020, we were doing 2 full topic and teach trainings every single week, just churning them out, right? Like, what are we going to talk about today? Oh, I don't know. Throw this up, right? Whereas now it's like, here are our top, most impactful trainings that we're going to go deeper into, and how can we get the people listening and more involved? How can we make sure they're actually getting things away from this training rather than have to go think about it away from the training? Let's get it done on the call, right?
mm,
So it's all of this design and preparation and thought process that even years and years of doing in the same idea, the same topic, but
mm,
just an entirely different format of that training, right? And I think we've
mm,
seen this in every area of body reset. Is things get better when Mandy and Ollie are doing nothing else but thinking about how do we make body reset better, right? And just
mm.
levels and levels and levels of that potency of what we can get across.
Yeah, yeah. And for the people listening, I think this, one, they get the benefit of that, but two, the it ties again back into real life in a very real sense. In this, and like for workout, for example, there's people that go and spend 2 hours in the gym 5 or 6 days a week and don't get as good a results as someone who spends 30 or 40 minutes 3 or 4 times a week because they're actually focused on quality of the movement that they're doing, progression, and actually moving the right muscle and not just flinging dumbbells around, that sort of thing. So it's quantity is never always the best way to go. And I think exactly the same with the food side of things as well. So often when we're looking at health and looking at changing our nutrition and our diet and all that, we need all these new recipes and we need all this new stuff when actually just eat the basics and do it consistently and focus on just the quality of what it is you're doing rather than having all the new things. And the outcome's always so much better and it's so much simpler as well because you're actually getting good at what you're doing rather than just adding more stuff to your head and overwhelming yourself.
Totally. And this is what we kind of uncovered, I guess, a bit more on our last episode, or one of the last ones, where we talked through, uh, I guess, how much health is about what's happening between your ears, like your
Mhm.
brain, as opposed to just what you eat and how you exercise, right? It's not just you getting on the scales and how much you weigh, it's your measurement of how you feel about that number and what that truly means, right? And
Mm,
allowing all of that context towards what your next actions are and how you feel about yourself and how you conduct yourself in the day, like that's the bigger stuff. So I think exploring that and allowing that to be a big part of how we build our program and continue to talk about health is very much the starting point. But to close the loop on this lady on our kickoff call that mentioned this idea of feeling guilty about having to do more work, this quantity discussion.
mhm,
What I think is really helpful, what I personally try do, and what has come up a lot inside of our calls has been this idea that of leaving loudly, right? This idea
mm,
of I'm getting the workout in to make sure I show up better. I'm making sure I've got this time for me so I can show up for you guys better, right? Whether family or business. And I've seen this play out really positively, both in the workplace where it now becomes a cultural thing of the performance of your team gets better because they're all looking after themselves and it's actually part of the conversation, right? I was talking to a real estate agent a little while ago and she was talking about with her sales team, like, what are you doing before you come to work so that you're on point, right? Like that's just such a massive upgrade to your sales team when you start thinking about how they're looking after themselves, right? So if you're not doing it for yourself and you're not talking about it in your business or department, that's a beautiful place to start. And then I've also seen it play out a lot in these family environments where they're saying, dad needs to get his workout in or he's going to be grumpy, right? So they're almost motivating you to get that workout in. Like, dad, why are you missing your workout today? Come on, go get out there.
mm,
And when that plays the right way, it's almost it's this concept we talk about a lot, which is discipline and environment, not just straight raw discipline the entire time, right? You're actually creating an environment to win on default. And if you haven't had those conversations, that you're constantly butting up against the wall, which is those weird, unspoken, I guess, stigmas around I need to be working longer, I need to always be there for my kids, or whatever the thing might be, that's ultimately getting in the way of you doing your stuff more often.
mhm. Yeah, I think that what I've thought about this a lot recently too, of actually rather than measuring the hours that it took or how long you've been going at something, what did you actually achieve? Like, what did you do in that time frame? Um, and actually measuring the outputs a little bit more. Did you actually do something that you're truly proud of, or did you just stay busy for a very long time and now you're tired and burnt out and don't want to do the thing anymore because you've lost all the joy in it because you've burnt yourself out?
Mm.
I think it's really easy for people who are potentially, like high performers or people that are quite motivated to achieve stuff to just get stuck on that hamster wheel of just doing more, 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 and actually getting. It's funny because it becomes a little bit of a self-repetitive loop because you get less and less satisfied because you get less and less efficient that you go harder and harder and do less and less, and it just really grinds you down after a while, and you've got to stop yourself and be like, actually, not actually achieving what I set out to achieve anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think this idea of effort versus output is kind of a nice way of a different way of saying quality versus quantity, right?
Mm,
Because doing something like writing for me is something that requires me to really reduce all other distractions to the point that I actually make sure I'm on a laptop instead of what's usually quite a wide monitor, right, where I can see 10 different things. So
yeah.
I personally move myself to a different device entirely to remove as much of that noise. I typically move myself to a different room with headphones, whatever. So I'm
Mhm,
in that spot where I'm designing as much of that distraction free environment as possible.
mm,
So it's an example in the work front, but it absolutely applies in that exercise space as well. And I've actually seen this a couple of times play out with people in places like Sydney or Auckland, etc., where traffic can be super volatile, is we've pulled them back towards a home gym or
mm,
a much less equipped gym closer to home, right? I'd
mm,
much rather you go to the gym that's walking distance than the one that's 20 minutes down the road that has all the bells and whistles, right? Like it's going to happen more often. Or like I've found with myself is if I don't get my workout in at lunchtime in the morning when I take my wife to work and it's an easy routine that I'm usually in, that mid-afternoon workout, there's always a hesitation because I know the traffic's going to be shit, right? So, what can I put in place in order to slow that process down or simplify that process? Sorry, so that that loop is not a hesitation, but a like, well, I just get that done now, right? And I think this
mm,
comes right back to the mentality of a 10-minute walk is always better than just not doing something. Like 10% is always better than 0%. And if you're
mm,
looking for a 2 hour walk, you won't find it very often compared to the
mm,
10-minute walk that can happen every day. And I think it really ties in the same mentality. But the,
mm.
the final pillar, I guess, will tie into, unless you've got anything to add there.
No, no.
No, the last one with that we're going to go through here is this idea of holding yourself accountable. And I think the first two in the same kind of different sides of the same coin, right? You've got build that no muscle and that pride and quality. It's both that internal reflection of how you're having those conversations with others and realizing that you need to be starting that conversation. People on the outside won't change. But then, two, that overall addressing that stigma that you have on just doing more and being busier, which is ultimately not going to help you move forward because we all have the same 24 hours, yet some of us feel flustered and always behind, and yet some people feel like they're making strides forward. The last one is actually, okay, now I understand these concepts. How am I going to make this apply from today? And I think this has been a theme throughout our first, I think we've done about 5 or 6 of these types of podcasts now. We're like, okay, what are you actually going to do today? Because it's not just about being on this podcast for entertainment, it's about it actually changing something in the way that you approach your day,
Mm,
meaning you've actually fundamentally learned something. So, what we're looking at here, I guess, is more how do you hold yourself accountable to this new intention, this new goal that you've set for your day? And what does it actually look like? So, I think for us, we're a huge fan of. I think you, as you said, Mandy, has it's less about the total amount of time taken, but what have I actually achieved? And I
mm,
think the best two that we always recommend here is one, what's written in your journal, right, or your planner for the day. What are the 1 to 2 things I wrote in my day, rather than just my random list of 100 to dos?
mm,
And this might be as well as or instead of what's actually showing in your calendar and what time block was actually achieved. And did I stay to that time block, which I find really interesting, right?
mm,
Something that rewind a couple of years ago, I used to try get 10 things done in my day. And the only time I felt successful was when I put everything else to the side and just literally did 12 hours straight and I got all of those things done, right?
yeah,
But it meant that unless that was my my day, my health started to struggle, my communications with friends and family started to struggle, like everything else it struggled, right? Because it was just
yeah,
like
yeah,
I can achieve all of these things, but the expense of what?
yeah.
So for me now, my shift in that success measure is: did I achieve that one thing in the time frame set? Was it 2, 3, 4 hours, but I had it blocked out and I just focused on that thing? Did I
Mm,
open emails? Did I open Slack? Did I open my phone? Or did I remove all of that stuff and just get that one big, tricky thing done? And for me,
mm,
it's been just as satisfying, if not more, because it's allowed me to get the thing done, get my head out of that space, and then just generally feel like I can switch off better. And I think the feedback from Q3 and Q4 last year was with a lot of our long-term members is a big win for so many of us by installing this habit, including myself, was to be able to actually switch off at the end of the day, right? And I think that in itself is a really good sign. If I've achieved something, really important today, but at the same time I was able to consolidate it enough to be able to switch off, and that in
mm,
itself both improves business and your ability to be present for your family, yourself, your health, all of these other things.
mm. Yeah, my head's going a lot of ways there. I think you highlighted what's something that I brought up last night when we were talking. There's two scenarios there. It might be that you're not able to fit everything in, and so the important things for your health and whatnot slip because you stay doing the things that you have to do, whether it's work, children, business, all those sorts of things. Or there's the other extreme of that where you are fitting them all in because you're that type of person who doesn't stop until it's all done. But it's sacrificing your health nevertheless because you work for 14 hours straight and you don't enjoy any of it and you're just burnt out. And neither of them are actually the right answer. But actually, that accountability piece kind of comes back to knowing, well, what's the actual important chunky piece here that I need to get done? Not doing all of it because we're all limited by our 24-hour day. But which is the actual thing that's going to free up that mental space to make it feel like I've done the thing that I needed to do, and allows you to enjoy what you've created within that. Um, there's I think this was from last year. I came across this quote, that's hard to say, that I emailed out. And I emailed it out a couple of times because it just kept landing quite well, and it was a little bit ouchy, but it was the quote, you struggle to set boundaries with other people because you haven't got strong boundaries with yourself. And I think this one of holding yourself accountable, this is the base piece, because building the no muscle requires accountability or boundaries with other people. Focusing on quality over quantity actually also is a boundary with other people, because it's letting go of the ego of just working hard and allowing yourself to be able to actually do something that's worthwhile, even if that's less. But it starts with being able to hold that boundary for yourself first, and that's knowing, what's important to you, and actually holding yourself to something. Because we often won't lie to other people, but we very often lie to ourselves about things, and we lie to ourselves about the things that we say we're going to do that we never quite get to. And yeah, I had a really good conversation over Christmas with my dad about this, about all of these things that can end up on your list of things that you want to do, and how often we go through life just thinking, oh yeah, one day I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that one day. And we save and hoard, and we kind of collect all these things that just accumulate in our brain and contribute to overwhelm and, you know, probably mental health issues and all that sort of stuff, that we're never actually going to do them anyway. So it's kind of like, get honest with yourself about what you can truly fit into your time and do that thing, and just allow it to be that. And then you get to enjoy that good feeling of having done that one thing.
Yeah, I love where you've gone with this, and there's a couple different ways. But just to come back to those conversations had over the break, I had this discussion with two or three different older men that
Mm,
were talking about they'd clearly put on weight, right? Like their belly was bigger, but they're like, oh, my weight on the scales is the same. Like I'm good, you know. I'm like, dude, that basically means that you've dropped muscle and put on fat because your belly's definitely hanging out more, right? And they know that. And I brought it up quite bluntly with one of them, in a more joking way. It's all about rapport, right? But once you have that and they bring it up, like, yeah, I know I need to do something about it, right? And they're going to swiftly move on. So they know that they're lying to themselves, but they're
mm,
saying something that simply stops them from moving forward. And I think that's a simple example of what we typically do in so many instances where they're like, like I didn't nail this food today, or yeah, I know it's a little bit too much carbs, but I'm back on it tomorrow type thing. And I'm like,
mm,
there are so many more opportunities for you to feel good today. Why does tomorrow need to be the new reset for that?
mm,
And I think there's so many examples, but that ability to look at where we're creating that life for ourselves that we know is not entirely true. And there's a little bit of discomfort in there, but there's also a little bit of thought required. And I think that's where most people simply don't take that second to just think through stuff.
mm,
I was talking to some of our coaches yesterday who are asking more open-ended questions like, why do you think it's happening this way? Or what do you think you need help with most? And frustratingly, the response is like, I don't know, what do you think? And it's like, no, I'd love to know from you first, because I want your brain to be working here as much as mine so that we can come
mm,
up with something that's truly beneficial and that you'll actually do. The only reason I bring that up is this idea that so many of us find it so uncomfortable to think and really think about our own problems or our own obstacles, yet
mm.
it's the only way to make it easier. So it
Yeah.
comes back to that classic, like, choose the easy life now to make it hard later, or choose the hard life now to make it easy later. It's
Mm,
just the ability to reflect or redesign those little habits that are shooting yourself in the foot now that just make it way easier to feel stronger, more energetic, leaner, all of these other things long term, right?
mm,
And if you're in that period, a little bit of motivation, a little bit of momentum, because you've got clear on a couple of intentions, this is also now the time to think about the hard stuff, about the obstacles of where you went wrong last time. Because if you don't do that stuff, you'll end up in the same spot, yet long term, that is much harder.
yeah. Yeah, like you said, it is a little bit uncomfortable, but it's no different to going and doing a workout. In the moment, we know it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it always feels better after. And I think I've just finished reading Ray Dalio's book Principles, and so much in that book. It's probably the most underlined book I've ever read. I think I'll have to go
Oh,
back and read it about 10 times. But one of the things that I took away from that was, he kind of really emphasizes this: get used to just sitting, like, in a moment, if something doesn't go the way you thought it would go, and it feels a little bit uncomfortable, and you feel that kind of friction of feeling a little bit frustrated with yourself or a little bit whatever, The thing we always do is we run away from that. We try and block it out. We don't want to feel that feeling. But the learning is in that moment of that little bit of friction or that discomfort. And I distinctly had this moment end of last year where I had a call. It didn't go as sort of expected it to go, and I was feeling a bit frustrated with myself. And I tried to run away from it. I was like, I'm going to, block this out. I was like, no, just sit with it a minute. What could I have done differently? How could it have been different? And if you just take that moment to one identify, there's a bit of friction here and I don't like it. You have a choice in that moment. Are you going to run away, or are you going to be honest with yourself and think, what am I going to do differently here? How can this be? And that's actually that piece of holding yourself accountable, is don't run away from those little moments of pain and discomfort, but actually explore them so that they don't happen again. Because if you deal with it once, it's like digging out a prickle. You don't necessarily have to go back and dig it out again. It's painful in the moment, but then it's done.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas if you leave it in there, it just continues to get hurt, continues to
Yeah.
be sore, and continues to be inflamed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it gets well worse in the long run.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. I think that's a great place to finish. There's a lot of reflection I think required from this. So again, if you are on that drive to work, or you're going for your run or your walk, hopefully just take the next 5 or 10 minutes rather than skipping into the next episode. Actually think on this a little bit, because I think that idea of how we approach doing more work as opposed to doing better work might just be the difference in that promotion, that next step in a career environment, or the ability to really switch off, unwind, and have a whole nother level of connection at home as well. And then on top of that, it's that ability to really be accountable for the things we said we would do, and that applies to, in most cases, actually doing less but doing better, and being able to find an avenue like a timer or a calendar block, or just how you restructure your to-do lists to make sure that there is more focus as opposed to more stuff. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed that sort of deep dive. We're going to be diving into this a lot more with our clients later today, and we'll see you on the next one.